The idea, and I kept saying this on Saturday when I was there for the game. This idea for Michigan is a tough one. It's a tough one because it starts like this. How do you make sure that nothing has changed when everything is different? That's what they're charged to do. And that's what's going to be so difficult and why next season is going to be so fascinating from a Michigan perspective. Everything is changing at Michigan and around Michigan. Got a new conference in the Big Ten. Got a new 12-team college football playoff. That in and of itself presents a lot of changes. They also are now trying to defend a national championship with all new faces. And yet, when you go into the building, when we met with them, when we talked with them, and then when we did the game, there is this sense within the group that nothing has changed. It's wild because, again, everybody's different. Let's just walk through that. How has nothing changed? Well, because from their standpoint, they will tell you that their culture, their philosophy, their structure, the way that they do things, the mentality of how they practice and go about their business, their systems, both offensively and defensively, their system of development hasn't changed. They're like, none of that is changing. This is status quo for the Michigan Wolverines. And yet, everybody doing those things is different. It is wild. You look around and it's basically a completely new coaching staff. It's new strength staff. And the only way that you can do this where everyone's different and nothing changes is if they're all kind of promoted from within. And it's not even promoted from within. It's like, are you part of that family? Were you part of that structure? Did you help build everything that we talk about when we talk about the Michigan culture? That's the sense that I got around their team. So they've got this whole new coaching staff, right? You've got a new head coach, Sherrone Moore, who obviously knows what it takes. He did it at the end of the season last year in some of their biggest games, namely Penn State and the Ohio State game. He was with Jim Harbaugh. He cut his teeth under Jim Harbaugh. He's been there for 6 years. He's been a tight end coach and an offensive line coach and a play caller. So the guy knows it, right? He understands what this is all about. So new head coach, and yet same mentality, same culture, same philosophy, same mentality. New strength coach. Ben Herbert goes with Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers, and yet Justin Tress is promoted. Now, Tress has been with Herbert everywhere that he's been. They got their start together. They would say that they built this idea and philosophy together. So in a lot of ways, this is just an extension of the exact same thing that Michigan has been doing and what they will continue to do. New face, nothing has changed. New offensive play caller, new defensive play caller. Both of these guys, Kirk Campbell on the offensive side, he was a quarterback coach last year in the offense. Nothing's going to change for the players. It's the same system. These guys, even though it might look a little bit different based on the talent that they put on the field, namely the quarterback position, because they don't have J.J. McCarthy, it is the same system for the players. So nothing's changing for the players. All the verbiage is the same, and for them, it's status quo. Same with the defensive side, which I think is even more fascinating. For the last 3 seasons, we've seen this Baltimore style of defense take hold with Michigan and be dominant, to the tune that last year they were the number 1 defense in America, both scoring and total defense. They were fantastic. That started 3 years ago with Mike Macdonald, when Jim Harbaugh went from the Don Brown college-oriented defense and he wanted to get an NFL-oriented defense. So he goes to his brother, John Harbaugh, and he says, hey, give me a couple of your young guys. I want to run your defense. He gives him Jesse Minter and he gives him Mike Macdonald. And he says, choose one of those guys. He chooses Mike Macdonald's, even though he said both of these guys are great. Mike Macdonald comes in and he implements the Baltimore Ravens defense. Run wall up front, hard edges. Remember Ajabo and Hutchinson? Hybrid linebackers, good safeties, could cover corners, length, speed. And they did well. Made it to the playoffs, beat Ohio State. Mike Macdonald gets an opportunity to go back to Baltimore, so he does. And guess what? Jesse Minter steps in. That same guy that John Harbaugh gave to his brother. Jesse Minter, fabulous job the last couple of years. Took and built upon what Mike Macdonald did in the Baltimore defense. Now Jesse moves on, and he's going to be the coordinator on the defensive side for Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers. Where do you go now? Because it's like, well, both the young guys are gone. What are we going to do? How about the guy that taught those two guys this defense? Or as this guy likes to call himself, the OG, the original of this defense, the grandfather himself, Wink Martindale. So guess what changes for the players? Nothing. Now, will he be more aggressive? Probably. That's his nature as a defensive play caller. But the structure and the philosophy and the system for the players remains the same. So again, we're stuck in this idea that nothing has changed and yet everybody is different. That's what it is on the coaching staff, and that also bleeds into the players because they lost a ton of really good players. We're going to see them drafted on Thursday night and Friday night and on Saturday this week in the NFL draft. You look at the offense, they're going to have 10 new starters. You look at the defense, and they lose Mikey Sainristil and Chris Jenkins and Jalen Harrell and like some guys that played a lot of football for them. And that's going to be tough to overcome. And yet they feel like because of the development side of their program that they're going to have players that are able to step into those roles, even if they weren't highly recruited, and perform on those levels. Now, whether they do or not remains to be seen, but that's what they believe at Michigan. And more power to them because they've proven that over the last 3 years. This is a program that is 40-3 in the last 3 years. 40-3. They just rattled off a 15-0 national championship. Okay, so it's hard to argue with what they're talking about. Before you get into these players, and I will, in particular, some of these guys that maybe you don't know at home that I was impressed with on Saturday, I started asking myself, like, how does this happen, right? How does this work, I think is a better way to put it. We've seen it happen, and we've seen it work. Lincoln Riley did it with Oklahoma after he took over for Bob Stoops. Ryan Day did it when he took over for Urban Meyer at Ohio State. Frank Solich had a lot of success after Tom Osborne, and then it kind of waned after a few years. David Shaw had a lot of success after he took over for Jim Harbaugh at Stanford. Now, it waned over the years. And I started to think to myself, like, well, what is it that allows you to have success even when somebody like Jim Harbaugh leaves? This is going to ring true also for Alabama. This rings true for your organization that you work for. This is a group dynamics, organizational structure conversation. What is it that allows that structure to have success when their leadership moves on? I think it has to do with that leadership and their style of leading while they're there. Okay? If you study leadership, and I've done a fair amount, I really love books on leadership. You'll see that there are people that can have success and loads of it, lots of different types of people. But it's interesting to see those programs that they lead, those organizations that they lead, when they leave. Some of them fail and some of them continue to succeed. So then you start to study, well, like what's the difference between the ones that fail after leaders leave and the ones that succeed? And the difference is the type of leader that those people are that leave an organization that can succeed. Generally speaking, in the research, it will show that they have a lot of personal humility. And that personal humility comes in because what they are is they are fiercely loyal and steadfast to the goals and purpose of the organization. Okay? And let's face it, whatever you think of Jim Harbaugh, that's kind of prototypical of what Jim Harbaugh is. Guy didn't really care if he got any credit. He was fiercely steadfast and had a fierce will towards the success of the organization as something bigger than himself and bigger than him in terms of the cause and the purpose of what was going on. And so when those type of people are leading, here's what they do is that they teach and they delegate. And when people delegate, then other people learn how to do it as well. You see, some people can do it all themselves and have a lot of success. But when they leave, everything falls off the cliff. When the people that really care about the organization leave, they delegate, they teach, and they leave the organization in a better spot than when they got there. And I think in a lot of ways, we're going to see if that's been the case at Michigan. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.